had waited outside my camper by Mr. Copper. I picked the site because nobody else wanted it. That should have told me something. It sat 9 miles beyond the last maintained campground, down a Forest Service road that narrowed from gravel to dirt, then from dirt to 2 muddy wheel tracks cut between the pines. No hookups, no picnic table. No cheerful little metal fire ring pretending civilization had followed me out there. Just a flat patch of ground beside a dry creek bed, surrounded by trees thick enough to block the evening light. Exactly what I'd been looking for. I'd spent the better part of 20 years camping in places where somebody's generator started at dawn, their dog barked at every falling pine cone, and their children treated the woods like an outdoor hallway. I wanted quiet. Real quiet. The kind you had to work for. My truck was a 3/4-ton diesel with enough scratches to discourage thieves and enough miles to discourage everyone else. The trailer was 26 feet, bumper pull, built for comfort but not luxury. Bed in the front, bathroom in the rear, dinette on one side, small kitchen on the other. Thin walls, plastic trim, and cabinets designed by someone who believed plates weighed less when you went camping. It wasn't a fortress, but it kept the rain off, the bugs out, and the bourbon upright. That was enough. I backed into the site while there was still some daylight left. The ground sloped slightly toward the creek, so I set 2 leveling blocks under the passenger side wheels, pulled forward, then eased back until the trailer sat level. I chalked both sides before I unhitched. Always chalk first. A trailer rolling backward with the tongue jack halfway down can ruin an afternoon in ways that require both tools and profanity. I dropped the tongue jack, disconnected the chains, breakaway cable, and 7-pin plug, then raised the coupler off the ball. The truck settled when the trailer's weight came off it. I pulled forward about 20 feet and parked facing the road. That was habit. Nose out. Keys in the same place. No coolers, chairs, or firewood stacked where they could block the truck. Most emergencies in the woods are boring. A tree falls. Somebody gets hurt. Weather moves in faster than expected. The people who get trapped are usually the ones who turn their campsite into a yard sale. I left a clear path from the trailer door to the driver's side of the truck. 20 feet. I remember measuring it with my eyes. At the time, it looked like nothing. I lowered the stabilizer jacks until they made firm contact with the ground. They weren't meant to lift the trailer, just stop it from rocking every time I moved. Then I checked the propane, switched on the refrigerator, and walked the site once with a can of bear spray clipped to my belt. There were no fresh tire tracks besides mine. No fire pit, no beer cans, no half-burned trash. That was unusual. Even remote campsites collect evidence of human stupidity. Cigarette filters, broken glass, food dumped 6 feet from where people sleep because apparently bears understand boundaries. This place was clean. Too clean, maybe. But I didn't think that then. I noticed the scratches on one pine tree near the creek. 4 parallel marks, shoulder high, cutting through the bark. Bear, I figured. Black bears climbed, scratched, rubbed, and generally left their signatures wherever they pleased. The marks looked old. The sap had dried dark along the edges. I checked the ground below them for tracks and found nothing clear. Just pine needles and hard dirt. I went back to the trailer. By 7, I had dinner cooking in a cast-iron skillet, a battery lantern hanging from the awning, and a folding chair positioned where I could watch the last light drain out of the trees. The forest was quiet, not silent, There's a difference. Silence is unnatural. Quiet is layered. Wind through pine needles. A woodpecker somewhere uphill. Small things moving in leaves. The dry creek ticking as loose stones cooled after sunset. I sat outside until full dark. That was when I first heard the knocking. 3 dull taps, not on the trailer, farther away. Knock, knock, knock. I turned my head toward the creek. Nothing moved between the trees. I waited. A minute passed. Then the sound came again, farther uphill this time. Knock, knock, knock. Wood on wood, maybe. A branch swinging against a trunk. Sound travels strangely in the mountains, especially after dark. Something that seems 20 yards away might be half a mile off. I finished my drink and went inside. The trailer door shut with its usual hollow slam. I locked the deadbolt, pulled the shade over the narrow window, and checked the screen latch out of habit. The temperature had dropped fast. I turned the furnace low, washed the skillet, and set the coffee maker for morning. By 9:30, I was in bed reading. The front of the trailer was dark except for a small lamp beside me. My phone had no signal, which was part of the appeal. I downloaded a book before leaving town. Something about a missing survey crew in Alaska. People vanished in the first chapter, which seemed careless. They'd brought 1 rifle for 6 men and left it in a tent. I was 20 pages in when something brushed along the outside wall. A long, dragging sound, not loud, just close. I stopped reading. The sound began near the front corner, inches from my head, and moved slowly toward the rear of the trailer. Scrap. I sat up. It continued past the kitchen window, then stopped. Branches, I thought, except there weren't any branches close enough to touch the trailer. I had checked when I backed in. I switched off the lamp. Darkness filled the front room. For a few seconds, all I heard was the furnace fan and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then something stepped onto the fold-out stair beneath the door. The metal flexed with a soft clang. I slid out of bed without turning the light back on. My boots were on the floor where I'd left them. I pulled them on, laced them loosely, and stood still. The step creaked again, once, then twice. Something was putting weight on it. The door handle moved, not violently. It turned down as far as the lock allowed, then eased back up. I felt the hair lift along my arms. Bears did strange things around trailers. They smelled food. They pushed. They pawed at doors. They climbed onto picnic tables and tore open coolers with the confidence of animals that had never paid for anything. But bears didn't usually try door handles. I reached above the bed and opened the narrow cabinet built into the front wall. The shotgun lay inside in a soft case. 12-gauge pump, 18-inch barrel, plain black stock, nothing decorative. I'd carried it for years, mostly because remote campsites are remote from help as well as neighbors. I set it on the bed, unzipped the case, and checked the chamber. Empty. I opened the small box beside it and took out 6 shells. Number 1 buckshot. I loaded 5 into the magazine tube and left the chamber empty. That was another habit. Loaded but not ready to fire until I decided it needed to be. Outside, the step gave one final creak. Then the weight lifted away. I waited a full minute before moving. The trailer remained still. I crossed to the dinette and looked at the monitor mounted beneath the cabinet. I'd installed 4 exterior cameras the year before after somebody stole a generator from a campsite while I was 10 feet away making coffee. Front, rear, driver's side, passenger side. The screen showed 4 grainy black and white images. The front camera caught the truck, pale in infrared, parked exactly where I had left it. The rear showed the dark creek bed. The driver's side camera showed trees. The passenger side camera showed the trailer steps and door. Nothing stood there. I rewound the footage. The recording jumped backward in 30-second blocks. Empty steps, empty steps, empty steps. Then the image glitched, a burst of static. The next frame showed the stair moving down under weight. There was still nothing on it. I leaned closer to the monitor. The step bent. The door handle lowered. No person, no bear. Nothing visible at all. Then the picture broke into static for 3 seconds. When it returned, the stair was empty again. I watched it twice. On the third replay, I noticed something in the upper right corner of the image. A pale shape near the roofline. Not enough to identify. Just a curved edge sliding past the camera, too close to focus. I looked up. The trailer roof was less than 8 feet above the ground. Something shifted overhead. A slow compression of fiberglass and aluminum. The roof bowed with a soft pop. Whatever was up there moved from the rear toward the front, one step at a time, heavy enough that the ceiling panels creaked beneath it. I took the shotgun from the bed. The pump came back with a hard, metallic sound and drove the first shell into the chamber. The footsteps stopped. I stood in the center aisle, barrel lowered, fingers straight along the receiver. My pulse was fast, but my hands were steady. People like to imagine fear makes you helpless. It doesn't. Not always. Sometimes it makes every small thing sharp. I could hear the furnace igniter clicking, the faint slosh of water in the fresh tank, the refrigerator compressor, a loose spoon vibrating against the side of the sink, and above me, directly over the dinette, something breathing. Slow, deep. The ceiling sagged less than an inch, then rose again. I backed away from it. The thing moved toward the front of the trailer, toward the bed. A soft scrape traveled across the roof, then stopped above the cabinet where I'd stored the shotgun. 3 knocks came from overhead. Knock, knock, knock. The same rhythm I had heard in the woods. I kept the muzzle pointed toward the ceiling. The shotgun held 5 shells total now. 1 in the chamber, 4 beneath it. I knew exactly what I had. The roof creaked once more. Then the weight disappeared. No jump, no scramble down the side. It was simply there, and then it wasn't. I checked the cameras again. Nothing moved around the trailer. The truck sat 20 feet away beneath the trees. I considered going for it. That thought lasted about 2 seconds. 8, the trailer was locked. The shotgun was loaded. The walls were thin, but they were still walls. The truck was outside. I poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a heavy glass and set it on the dinette table. Not because I needed liquid courage. I needed something ordinary sitting in front of me. Then I took the seat facing the door. Shotgun across my lap, lights off, cameras glowing. I sat there and listened to the forest. At 11:17, something crawled underneath the trailer. I knew the time because the camera monitor displayed it in pale green numbers along the bottom of the screen. 11:17:08. The trailer shifted once beneath me. Not enough to move the glass on the table, but enough to make the bourbon ripple. I tightened my grip on the shotgun. The sound came from below the floor, somewhere beneath the dinette. A soft scrape, then another. Slow movement through gravel. The underbelly of a travel trailer is corrugated plastic fastened beneath the frame. Above it sit the plumbing, wiring, tanks, insulation, and the plywood floor deck. It keeps road spray and animals away from the equipment. It was never intended to stop something determined to tear its way through from below. The scraping moved toward the rear. I watched the camera feeds. The front camera still showed the truck. The passenger side camera showed the steps and a strip of empty ground. The driver's side camera showed trees and darkness. The rear camera pointed toward the dry creek bed. Nothing moved in any of them. Underneath me, something tapped against the plywood. Once. Twice. Then it stopped. I waited. The shotgun rested across my thighs, muzzle angled toward the rear wall. The bourbon sat untouched beside my left hand. 5 shells. 1 chambered. 4 in the tube. I kept count because not keeping count with a shotgun is how men end up pulling the trigger on an empty chamber while their brain insists there should be 1 more. Nothing happened for several minutes. Then I heard a kitten crying outside. Small. Weak. Close enough that I could hear the catch in its breath. Mew. Silence. Mew. I looked toward the door. The sound came again from somewhere near the passenger side of the trailer. A kitten lost in the woods was not impossible. People abandoned animals everywhere. Campgrounds collected strays. Coyotes chased them. Owls took them. But this place was 9 miles beyond the last maintained site. There were no houses nearby. No other campers. No tire tracks but mine. The kitten cried again. I leaned toward the monitor. The passenger side cameras showed the steps, nothing else. The sound moved closer. Mew. A faint scratching began at the bottom of the door. Light claws on metal. I did not move. The scratching continued for maybe 15 seconds, then stopped. The kitten cried from directly beneath the window. I pictured something small crouched on the step. Thin ribs, wet fur. 1 damaged paw. That picture arrived without my permission. I looked at the door lock, then at the shotgun, then back at the screen. Nothing stood outside. The cry came again. This time, the sound was wrong. Not dramatically wrong. There was no growl hidden beneath it, no supernatural distortion. It was simply too identical. Same length, same pitch, same break at the end. A recording played twice. Mew. I sat back. No. The word sounded flat in the dark trailer. The crying stopped. Not faded. Stopped. The camera feeds remained empty. For 31 minutes, there was nothing. I know because I watched the clock. The furnace cycled twice. The refrigerator kicked off. The bourbon warmed in the glass. At 11:49, I began to wonder whether whatever was outside had moved on. At 11:51, I heard a dog whining near the front of the trailer. Low and pained. The kind of sound an injured dog makes when it is trying not to attract something worse. I closed my eyes briefly. It had changed tactics. The dog whined again. A faint panting followed. Then nails scraped across the gravel between the trailer and the truck. I looked at the front camera. The truck sat exactly where I had parked it, 20 feet away, driver's side facing the trailer. The ground between us was empty. The whining came from just outside the front wall, beneath the camera. Something bumped the trailer tongue. The frame gave a dull metallic knock. The dog yelped. I stayed seated. Another whine. Then weak scratching against the propane cover. It sounded convincing. Too convincing. I had owned dogs most of my life. I knew the sounds, the uncertain breathing, the scrape of claws, the shift of weight when pain made an animal restless. Whatever was outside knew them too. I reached forward and turned up the volume on the monitor. The camera microphones carried only static and wind. The whining did not come through the speaker. I froze. It came through the wall, clear as before. But the microphone 6 feet from the supposed source heard nothing. The dog whimpered again. I watched the front camera. Nothing moved beneath it. Then the driver's side feed flickered. A line of static rolled upward across the image. I shifted my attention to it. The trees appeared pale under infrared. For a moment, everything looked normal. Then something leaned into frame, only part of a face. White skin stretched tightly over a narrow cheek, one small black eye. It was upside down. The eye stared directly into the camera. The mouth was out of frame. I raised the shotgun. The face remained still. The injured dog sound continued from the opposite side of the trailer. That was the part that got me. It could make the noise in one place while standing somewhere else. The black eye blinked. A pale hand rose beside the face. Long fingers closed around the camera housing. The image jolted, then went black. 3 feeds remained. Front, rear, passenger side. The dog stopped whining. I stood slowly and moved toward the center aisle. The trailer felt different with one camera gone. Not less safe, exactly. Smaller. A blind side had opened. Something moved along the driver's side wall. A soft brush against the aluminum skin. Then a fingernail dragged from the front of the trailer toward the rear. Scribe. I tracked the sound with a shotgun barrel. It stopped behind the bathroom. The rear camera glitched. Static washed across the creek bed. The picture stabilized. For 1 second, I saw nothing. Then a pale figure rose from below the frame. It came up slowly, unfolding beside the rear bumper. Too tall. Its shoulders were narrow, and its arms hung almost to its knees. Its skin looked gray-white under infrared. Not hairless, exactly. More like whatever covered it was too fine for the camera to separate from the flesh beneath. Its back faced me. A child began crying. Soft, exhausted sobbing. The figure's shoulders did not move. It stood completely still while the sound came from it. A child trying not to cry too loudly. The kind of crying that says they have already learned screaming does not bring help. My mouth went dry. The figure tilted its head, not toward the trailer, toward the camera. The head kept turning after the shoulders stopped. 90 degrees, then farther, until the face looked backward over its own spine. Small black eyes, no nose I could make out, and a mouth that opened too wide. The crying continued after the jaw stopped moving. I brought the shotgun to my shoulder. The creature stared into the camera, then smiled. Not because the mouth changed shape, because the teeth appeared. Rows of thin white points packed too close together. The child's crying became louder. The creature rushed the camera. The screen filled with its face. Static burst across the monitor. The rear feed went black. 2 cameras remained. Passenger side, front. The trailer rocked once. A hard impact struck the rear wall where the camera had been. Then another. Plastic snapped outside. I heard the camera housing hit the ground. The creature had given me exactly one clear look before taking it away. I stepped backward toward the dinette. The passenger side camera still showed the door and steps. The front camera still showed the truck. Clean, untouched, waiting. The crying stopped. A new sound came from beneath the floor, metal bending. Then the corrugated underbelly tore with a long, ugly rip. Something heavy dropped against the gravel. A fitting or length of pipe. Water began spraying beneath the trailer. Not a slow leak. A pressurized rush. The fresh water line. I moved toward the bathroom, listening. Water hammered against the underside, then spread outward through the dirt. The pump kicked on automatically. It whined for 3 seconds before I reached the control panel and shut it off. The sound outside continued as the tank drained by gravity. 40 gallons disappearing into the ground. I checked the monitor. The truck remained in the front feed. No movement, no damage. The passenger side view showed water creeping beneath the steps. Something struck the driver's side stabilizer jack. The impact rang through the frame. The trailer lurched. The bourbon glass slid 6 inches across the table and stopped at the edge. I grabbed it before it fell, set it in the sink, then lowered the shotgun toward the floor. A second blow hit the jack. Metal tore. The rear of the trailer dropped slightly on the driver's side. Cabinet doors swung open. A plate slid forward and shattered on the floor. I did not fire. There was nothing to shoot at. The creature was beneath me, hidden by the plywood, tanks, plumbing, and steel frame. It struck again, this time directly beneath the dinette. The plywood jumped under my boots with a hard, solid thump. Dust shook loose around the table pedestal. One of the screws holding it to the floor lifted slightly, then settled back. I aimed down. Another impact came from beneath the same spot. This one drove the pedestal sideways and split the vinyl flooring around one of the mounting bolts. The tabletop twisted. A cup slid from the edge and bounced across the floor. Then it hit the floor again. The mountain's bolt tore sideways through the plywood. The vinyl split open in a jagged line. A dark crack appeared beside the pedestal base. Something moved beneath it. I stepped backward. A narrow, pale finger forced its way up through the damaged opening beside the bolt. It bent sideways against the torn vinyl. Another finger appeared beside it. Then a third, long, jointed too many times. They curled over the broken edge and pulled. The plywood groaned. The crack widened. A whole hand pushed through. Gray-white skin, black dirt packed beneath long nails. The wrist twisted as the fingers clawed blindly across the floor, searching. I fired. The blast filled the trailer. The table jumped. The ceiling lights flickered. Buckshot tore through the pedestal base, the broken plywood, the insulation, and whatever was beneath. The hand vanished. Something screamed outside. Not like an animal. Not like a person. Like several sounds stacked together and forced through one throat. Then silence. Smoke hung in the aisle. My ears rang. I worked the pump. The empty shell spun across the floor and landed beside the broken plate. 4 shells, 1 chambered, 3 in the tube. I kept the muzzle on the hole. Water continued pouring beneath the trailer. Nothing came back through. I waited 30 seconds, then a minute. The broken plywood remained still. The passenger side camera flickered. I looked at the monitor. The steps filled the frame. Empty. Then the picture jerked sideways. The camera tore free from the wall. For an instant, it hung at an angle, showing the underside of the awning and a strip of roof. A pale hand covered the lens. The feed died. Only the front camera remained. The truck stood alone beneath the trees. Perfectly clear. Perfectly untouched. I stared at it. The creature had destroyed every camera except the one pointed toward the truck. Not randomly. Not because it had missed one. It had left me the only view that mattered. The driver's door. The clear path. 20 feet of open ground. I checked the time. 12:26 a.m. Something moved outside along the driver's side, where I could no longer see. A storage compartment latch snapped. The hatch opened. Plastic bins shifted inside. Then the hatch slammed shut. Another compartment opened farther forward. The creature was inspecting the trailer now, learning it. A dull pop came from beneath the bed. The ceiling lights went out. The monitor stayed on, running from its backup battery. The furnace died. The refrigerator fell silent. The creature had found the trailer's battery connection. The only light left inside came from the camera screen. The truck glowed in grainy black and white. Safe. Close. Waiting. I moved back to the dinette and sat down. My hands were steady again. That bothered me more than shaking would have. A calm man can make bad decisions with great confidence. The front camera showed no movement. I looked at the door. 20 feet. I could cover 20 feet in 3 seconds. Maybe 4 while carrying the shotgun. The keys were in my right front pocket. The truck was parked nose out. The driver's door was unlocked. I had done everything correctly. The route was there. The creature wanted me to see that. A faint knock came from the front wall, directly beneath the camera. Knock, knock, knock. I watched the feed. Nothing stood there. The forest remained empty. Then a man's voice called from beyond the trailer. "Junior, come check this out." Every muscle in my body locked. The voice came from somewhere near the creek, warm, amused, impatient in the familiar way I remembered. My father had called me Junior until the day he died. 11 years ago. I kept the shotgun across my knees and stared at the truck feed. Nothing moved. The voice did not repeat itself. The darkness settled back around the trailer. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. I did not answer. I did not touch the door. Eventually, I reached for the bourbon, took one swallow, and returned the glass to the table. The front camera continued showing the truck. Untouched. Available. A lie built from headlights, steel, and 20 feet of open ground. At 12:58, something struck the underside of the trailer near the broken floor. I raised the shotgun. Nothing came through. Another 10 minutes passed. Then my father called again. This time, the voice sounded frightened. "Junior, I need your help." A pause, then louder. "Hurry." The second time my father asked for help, I almost answered. Not because I believed it was him. I knew better than that. My father had been dead 11 years. I had watched them close the casket. I had stood beside the grave while rain collected along the brim of my hat and listened to a preacher describe a man he had met twice. But the voice outside was exact, not close, exact. "Junior, I need your help." A pause. "Hurry." It carried the same rough edge my father's voice had picked up during his last few years. The same shortened breath between words. The same impatience he used whenever he had crawled beneath a tractor, found something heavier than expected, and realized he should have asked for help before getting himself pinned. There are memories that fade around the edges. That one had not. I sat at the dinette with a shotgun across my knees and kept my mouth shut. The broken floor beside the table pedestal remained dark and still. Cold air rose through the hole, carrying the smell of wet soil, torn insulation, and something sour beneath both. The monitor showed only the truck. Nothing crossed the frame. Nothing moved under it. The voice did not call again. At 1:15, the water beneath the trailer stopped running. At 1:23, the wind died. After that, the forest went completely quiet. No branches moving, no insects, no steps on the roof, no scratching beneath the floor. The creature did not test the walls again. It did not cry like a kitten. It did not whine like a dog. It did not use my father's voice. It did nothing. That was the final lure. I understood that much. The noises had failed. The damage had failed. The hand through the floor had cost it blood, assuming whatever had sprayed beneath the trailer was blood. Now it wanted absence to do the work. Silence gives a man room to think. Too much room. At first I watched the clock. 1:34, 1:51, 2:07. The numbers advanced in pale green along the bottom of the monitor, while the truck sat unchanged beneath the trees. I tried to picture the creature moving away, heading deeper into the woods, losing interest, hunting something easier. Every version of that thought ended the same way. With my hand on the door, I did not move. The trailer cooled after the battery died. The furnace had stopped, and the temperature inside fell steadily. I pulled on my coat without setting down the shotgun. The broken door side camera left that entire half of the trailer invisible. The rear and driver's side were blind, too. Only the truck remained, the one image the creature had chosen to leave me. The bourbon glass still sat in the sink where I had placed it before the first shot. I considered pouring another drink and decided against it. One had been enough. If I made a mistake now, I wanted it to belong entirely to me. At 2:30, something dripped beneath the floor. Slow, irregular. I listened until I decided it was water falling from torn plumbing. At 3, my right leg cramped from sitting still. I extended it carefully, moving 1 inch at a time. The dinette cushion compressed beneath me with a faint hiss. Nothing outside reacted. At 3:17, I thought I saw something move beneath the truck. I leaned closer to the monitor. The infrared image grain shifted in waves. Shadows thickened around the tires. The underside of the truck was nearly black. Nothing came out. I watched for 10 minutes. Still nothing. The creature could have left hours earlier. That was the thought it wanted. I began to understand the game more clearly. It had never been impatient. Every attack had served a purpose. The kitten tested sympathy. The dog tested habit. The child tested conscience. My father tested grief. The damage tested fear. The truck tested hope. Now the silence tested time. It did not need me to believe I was safe. It only needed me to become uncertain enough to check. At 4:12, I stood. My knees cracked loudly in the dead trailer. I froze. The shotgun remained shouldered, pointed toward the floor near the door. Nothing moved. I took one step into the aisle, then another. Broken ceramic shifted beneath my boot. I eased my foot back and stepped around it. The distance from the dinette to the door was less than 6 feet. It took me nearly a minute to cross. I stopped beside the kitchen counter. From there, I could reach the door handle without standing directly in front of it. The camera monitor was behind me, mounted under the cabinet. I angled it slightly so I could see the feed in the reflection of the microwave door. The truck remained centered, driver's door visible, ground between the truck and trailer empty. I listened. Nothing. I could not wait forever. Dawn would come eventually, but daylight would not tell me where the creature was. If it was waiting outside the door, first light would only make me easier to see. I needed to test it, not the way it had tested me. My way. I shifted the shotgun into my left hand and reached for the deadbolt with my right. I did not unlock it. I wrapped my fingers around the handle and jerked it down hard. The latch slammed against the frame. I shook the handle violently. Metal rattled. Then I drove both heels against the floor in rapid succession. 3 hard stomps toward the door. A pause. Two more. Faster. The sound was ugly inside the small trailer. It resembled someone fumbling with the lock, throwing the door open and running. For half a second, nothing happened. Then movement exploded beneath the truck. A pale shape shot from the darkness between the front and rear tires. It had been lying flat beneath the chassis. Waiting, the creature came out on all fours. Its back arched high. Its arms were longer than its legs, hands slapping the dirt as it crossed the open ground. The small black eyes were fixed on the trailer door. Its mouth was already open. It covered the 20 feet faster than a man could have run it. I had just enough time to see the lie clearly. The clean path, the untouched truck, the empty camera frame. It had been under there the entire time. The creature struck the trailer steps. Metal collapsed with a violent clang. Its body hit the door hard enough to bow the center inward. The frame twisted. The deadbolt held. I stepped back and brought up the shotgun. The creature hit the door again. The outer aluminum skin split around the lower hinge. Foam insulation burst through the opening in pale chunks. A hand punched into the trailer. Long fingers clawed blindly across the vinyl floor. They found the bottom edge of the door and pulled. The aluminum peeled inward with a tearing shriek. I fired through the opening. The shotgun blast slammed through the confined space. Buckshot tore into the pale wrist and whatever waited on the other side. The hand snapped backward. The creature screamed. The sound came from one throat this time. No kitten, no child, no human voice. Just pain and rage. The damaged door buckled outward. For an instant, I saw part of the creature through the torn opening. A narrow shoulder, gray-white skin, the side of that enormous mouth. Black blood sprayed across the steps and gravel. I worked the pump. The empty shell struck the counter and rolled into the sink beside the bourbon glass. 3 shells remained. Outside, the creature crashed through the campsite. I heard it hit the trailer tongue, scramble across loose gravel, then slam into the trees. Branches snapped in rapid succession. Not one branch, dozens. The sound moved away from the campsite, deeper into the forest, until even the larger breaks became faint. Then there was nothing. I kept the shotgun aimed through the hole in the door. The cold air smelled of burnt powder and wet pine. The front camera showed the truck. No movement beneath it now. That meant nothing. The creature had already taught me that. I returned to the dinette. The door no longer sealed. A jagged opening near the bottom exposed the folded steps and a patch of ground outside. I dragged the mattress from the bed and wedged it against the damaged door, then braced the dinette table beneath the handle. It would not stop the creature if it returned. Neither had the original door, but it gave me layers. Layers mattered. I sat with the shotgun aimed toward the opening and waited. The creature did not come back. The forest slowly regained its ordinary sounds. Wind moved through the pines. Something small rustled near the creek. An owl called once from far uphill. Those noises should have comforted me. They did not. At 5:20, the sky beyond the front camera changed from black to deep gray. The truck's shape sharpened. Tree trunks appeared behind it. The camera switched out of infrared, and the image briefly washed white before settling into dull morning color. Black truck, brown dirt, green trees. Nothing pale, nothing moving. I stayed inside. Daylight is not a force field. People like to treat sunrise as though nature signs a contract at dawn agreeing to behave. It does not. I waited until I could see the entire campsite clearly through the remaining camera. Then I waited another 20 minutes. At 6:14, I removed the table brace. The mattress fell inward when I pulled it away from the door. The lower section was bent and torn. The deadbolt still sat in the frame, but the frame itself had twisted nearly an inch. I loaded the 2 loose shells from the box into my coat pocket. The shotgun held 3, 1 chambered, 2 in the tube. I unlocked the deadbolt. The handle barely moved. I put my shoulder into the door. It resisted, then broke free with a pop of bent metal. Cold morning air entered the trailer. I stood in the doorway and studied the campsite. The trailer steps had collapsed on one side. One hung twisted from its mounting bracket. Water had soaked the ground beneath the trailer and turned the dirt black. The passenger side camera lay near the steps, lens crushed. The rear camera was gone entirely. Along the edge of the woods, branches hung broken where the creature had fled. Dark stains marked the gravel near the door. They led 10 feet toward the trees and stopped. Not faded. Stopped. I searched the ground beyond them. No footprints, no drag marks, nothing. The truck waited 20 feet away. It looked exactly as it had on camera. No broken windows, no flat tires, no open doors, no scratches I could see. I stepped down carefully, avoiding the ruined stair. The shotgun remained shouldered. Every few feet, I stopped and listened. The forest was alive now. Birds moved overhead. Water dripped from the damaged trailer. Somewhere down the slope, a squirrel barked at nothing. I reached the truck. The driver's door opened normally. I climbed in, locked it, and kept the shotgun across my lap. The keys came from my pocket. I inserted one into the ignition and turned it. Nothing happened. No dash lights, no chime, no click from the starter. The cab remained dead. I turned the key back and tried again. Nothing. I checked the headlights. Dead. I pulled the hood release and stopped. Opening the hood would put me outside again. I looked through the windshield at the trailer. From here, I could see the front camera mounted high on the trailer wall. Its lens pointed directly at the truck. The creature had left that camera untouched because it needed the picture to remain believable. The truck had looked safe all night. It had looked ready. I stepped back outside. The hood opened cleanly. The battery was still there. Terminals tight, no visible damage. I followed the positive cable downward with my eyes, then crouched beside the front wheel. The shotgun stayed in one hand. Beneath the truck, sections of wiring hung loose. The main harness had been pulled from its clips and torn apart near the frame rail. Several heavy cables were split open. Copper strands shone bright where they had been ripped, not chewed, pulled. The damage was hidden from the camera by the truck's body. Every visible part had been left alone. I sat back on my heels. The creature had never intended to let me drive away. It had left the truck looking untouched because untouched was what I needed to see. It had not offered me an escape. It had built one, a false one, something I could believe in long enough to open the trailer door. I stood and looked toward the tree line. Nothing looked back. I considered trying to repair the wiring. Then I looked at the torn harness again. I had tools in the truck, tape, crimp connectors, spare wire. But the damage ran farther beneath the chassis than I could see, and working on it would require lying on my back under the same truck the creature had used as a hiding place. That idea did not survive long. I took the day pack from behind the seat. Water bottle, first aid kit, flashlight, road flare, a handful of protein bars. I added the remaining shotgun shells and locked the truck out of habit, though I no longer knew what I was locking it against. The Forest Service road ran 9 miles back toward the maintained campground. 9 miles was a long walk. It was also better than another minute beside the trailer. I started toward the road. The shotgun rested over my shoulder, muzzle down. I did not look back until the campsite disappeared behind the first bend. The trailer sat crooked beneath the trees. Door torn open, water pooled beneath it. The black truck remained parked beside it, clean and useless. From that distance, the place looked quiet, almost peaceful. I kept walking. A logging truck found me 4 miles later. The driver slowed when he saw the shotgun and nearly continued past me. I could not blame him. A man walking out of the woods at 7 in the morning carrying a 12 gauge and wearing dried blood that is not his own tends to complicate a workday. He rolled down the passenger window 2 inches. "You all right?" "No." He studied me for several seconds. Then he unlocked the door. We drove back toward town without much conversation. I told him an animal had damaged my trailer. That was close enough to truth for 2 strangers sharing a cab. The sheriff took a report. A Forest Service officer returned to the campsite with 2 deputies later that morning. They found the trailer, truck, broken cameras, torn plumbing, damaged stabilizer, and the holes in the floor and door. They found the blood, too. The samples did not match any animal in the state database. That part never made it into the written report. The truck was towed the next afternoon. The mechanic called me 2 days later. He said the electrical damage was strange. The main harness had been pulled loose in several places, starter cable torn apart, ground straps ripped away, connectors crushed by hand or something shaped enough like one to leave pressure marks. He asked whether I had driven over scrap metal. I said no. He asked whether an animal could have gotten under there. I told him that was what everyone kept saying. There was a long silence on the phone. "Animals chew," he finally said. This didn't. I never repaired the trailer. Insurance called it wildlife damage, which was apparently easier for everyone involved. I sold the truck after the wiring was replaced. There was nothing wrong with it anymore. I simply did not like looking beneath it. I still camp. Hotels mostly. Sometimes cabins. Places with solid floors and doors thick enough that knocking stays outside. And when something goes quiet in the woods, I do not mistake that silence for safety. I wait. Because whatever had been outside that trailer was patient. Fortunately, so was I. Special thanks to Charlotte for helping me with the illustrations